You're listening to The Life Manual with your hosts Tom Payani and Emma Bradford, a practical guide giving you tips and tools to enjoy a happy, fulfilled and successful life.
Welcome to The Life Manual with me, Tom Payani, again with the lovely Emma Bradford. How are you doing today,
Hello,
Emma?
I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm great. I know today's show is going to be good.
It's one of my favourite topics.
Because I know you love talking about today's topic, which is going to be the inner critic. Mm-hmm. And we spoke a lot about this off air. I think we're going to be full of information today because we're both got a lot of experience with this, haven't we?
Exactly.
All right. Well, okay. I mean, I'm not even sure if we need to define what the inner critic is because everybody's got one. But you know, how can you summarize the inner critic in your own words, in your definition?
Yeah. So I mean, this is something that I've done many different workshops on this particular topic here in Barcelona, and the inner critic is that negative chatter within, that voice that's always saying, oh, you're not good enough, you can't do it, you're this, you're that, you're XYZ, all these mean things that we say to ourselves.
Yeah, and I think it's important to say that every single person in the world has an inner critic. No one is an exception to this rule, are they?
Exactly. Even NLP practitioners. We've just learnt to deal with it in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the key. So everybody in the world has their own inner critic, and it's known in lots of different ways. Some people call it their ego. Other people call it, negative self-talk.
Yeah, or even the gremlin.
Gremlin inner critic. But it's that voice that is always just trying to, keep you down and make you feel negative and make you feel you're not worthy and you're not good enough. But there's good news. We can manage this guy.
Exactly.
We can manage him. I mean, and that's really important because he can be he or she can be a bit, can be a bit overwhelming sometimes. And, this is, the inner critic is what, causes depression in people and can completely ruin people's lives. This isn't something to be taken lightly, but the great news is it is something that can be managed and can be worked on.
Yeah. It's what we do with it that counts. Because, I mean, basically, it's just wanting to keep us within the comfort zone. It just wants us to stay within the comfort zone and not to step out of that. And how I see it is that every single person, we have this wonderful loving part within us, and then we have this fearful part within us as well. And the fearful part is the voice of the inner critic. The inner critic that is saying, oh, you can't do it, or they won't like you, or this and that and the other. And yeah, it's up to us to choose whether we listen to it, learn from it, and choose to follow what we want in life regardless, or we listen to it and do what it says.
Yeah. I mean, one thing you mentioned just before we came on air was the inner critic hangover. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I noticed that sometimes, personally and also with clients, that you might not even be aware of the negative self-talk as it's going on. Sometimes you're aware of the symptoms that happen afterwards. So if you notice that you're suddenly feeling tired, or you feel that your emotional state has dropped, like you're feeling a bit sad or blue or angry or irritable, then those can be symptoms of listening to the inner critic. So I call it like the inner critic hangover. It's the symptoms that we get from listening to the inner critic too much.
Yeah, and you briefly mentioned it there as well, but I think it's important to recognize as well that to differentiate yourself from the inner critic, and a lot of people, and I can speak from experience here, a lot of people, and it's really normal to do this, is think that the inner critic is you just feeling bad about yourself and being negative towards yourself and feeling unworthy of yourself and thinking you have low self-esteem and low confidence. And as soon as you realize, actually, that's not necessarily me who's doing that. That's just a part of my ego or a fearful aspect of my psyche, or however you want to define it. And it can be a little bit strange to try and think about it in those terms. You know, there's a voice in my head that's not me. You know, don't worry, you don't have to put a straitjacket on. It's a very natural thing to think. But, you know, it's not who you really are. This is something that has been constructed in various ways.
Much more.
I mean, you know, let's just touch on that, you know, where this thing comes from, because that's going to be a question a lot of people are asking. They're like, all right, Tom, you've explained what the inner critic is, but why have I got this? Why have we got this? Where has it come from? You know, and it can come from a number of places, can't it?
Yeah, so one aspect where it can come from is from past experiences. If we've learned a limiting belief, or for example, if one of our parents said something critical to us, then quite often, as we grow up through life, we can be repeating the same thing to ourselves. So our inner critic is just on repeat, really, and just repeating what we learned as a young kid.
Yeah, if you've been told something your whole life, it's a truism, isn't it? You start to believe it. And this is something not just from a family, not from your family, but it can be socially constructed.
Exactly, in school, with teachers or other kids, or
So
anyone.
It comes from school, bad experience of school, if you got bullied, you know, as we said before, family and friends, you know, even if in today's world, social media, you know, there's this, and it's always been like this, but this whole idea of keeping up with the Joneses and comparing yourself with other people. You know, when you compare yourself with other people, your inner critic is only going to make you lose, isn't it?
I mean, that's one of the key things that I work on when I'm doing one-on-one sessions with, especially with women with body image, like social media, and making comparisons all the time with other people. I mean, that's when the inner critic pops up a lot.
Yeah, I mean, and this sort of, you know, things like social media are just beautiful for the inner critic, aren't they? Because you have these images of these women that are not real.
We have a lot of filters.
Well, anybody, fortunately, in another life I was a photographer, and I know that they're not real. And I actually had a funny story. Well, it's not funny, but I had a story once when I was in class, and I was a teacher as well, and some students in the class were getting a bit down on themselves about body image, so I just changed the lesson and just loaded up Photoshop and just showed them actually, you know, what you can do on Photoshop and how if you're trying to attain this standard of beauty, it's just not possible because these girls don't look like this. Exactly. So when you've got that in front of you all day, every day, bombarding you, your inner critic's going to be having a great time, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And it's important to remind ourselves that there's so much more behind those photos. That's not what you see is not everything.
Yeah. So, you know, there's all these facets: society, family, friends. You know, because a lot of people don't. You know, family and friends are not necessarily doing it in a negative. You know, they're not. It's not. There's no maliciousness there, is there?
No.
You know, because they've got their own inner critic.
Yeah, exactly. And to them, it might be the truth of whatever they might say, whether it's about you personally or whether it's about life in general. The money is hard to come by, then if that's something that you grow up with, then your inner critic can start repeating that and using that as an excuse whenever you want to make decisions and choices in your life. But the great thing to know is that if we can learn it, we can unlearn it. So if we pick up on these beliefs, we can let go of these limiting beliefs as well.
Yeah. I mean, how do you respond to your inner critic then?
So there's a couple of things. So simply just by the awareness of knowing that that's not me, that's not all of me. There's so much more there. The same with every single other person. Just being aware of what it is, and that it's just trying to keep you in the comfort zone. And I intend to listen to it, learn from it, and choose what fulfills me the most, regardless. And quite often, if I notice that there's a negative voice, or like the inner critic is saying something negative, just by rephrasing it. So rather than saying, I feel stupid, you can say, my inner critic says that I feel stupid. So that's one very quick way just to detach from that. So you're creating that detachment and realizing that that's not you. That's not all of you. So say, just repeat everything back. My inner critic says that.
changing the perspective, and as we said before, it's realizing that you're not your inner critic, and again, I'm not saying you have to walk down the street and, have a conversation with your inner critic out loud and everybody thinks you're crazy. But, the truth is that everybody's in the same situation and it's not as weird as you think.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, it's just recognizing that you're not your inner critic and, responding to your inner critic is healthy. Asking your inner critic, if your inner critic acts out and says something because it's trying to get a reaction and trying to wind you up, so what? All right, that's what you think. So what? Doesn't mean it's true.
Exactly.
That's how you respond. Or who cares? Your judgments don't mean anything to me. They're not valid judgments. Or if your inner critic says you shouldn't be able to do something, why not? Just because you've said that doesn't mean it's true. And it's this separation of yourself and your inner critic that is where you can start practically making these changes, right?
Yeah, because quite often we listen to it and then act on what it says. Like if it says, "Oh, you can't do something," then we just stop and we don't do anything.
You just accept that it's the truth.
Exactly. Whereas in reality, like how I like to see it is that the inner critic is saying all these things, but it's in its own funny way. It's testing you. It's saying, are you really going to believe everything I say? Or are you going to carry on your life working towards what you love regardless? It's giving us a test. So it's up to us to take that and to challenge it. And there's many different ways we can do that. And another thing that we can do is, if we hear the inner critic saying some negative I am statement, so I am ugly or I am stupid, we can ask ourselves, aren't I more than that? What am I that's not ugly? Or what am I that's not stupid? And that's a very quick way to quickly change the focus from the positive to the negative. And this technique I use a lot in the workshops and with clients, and I call it transforming the inner critic into the inner cheerleader, because it's a very quick way just to go from the negative to the positive.
Okay. And how do you do that? How do you transform your inner critic to the inner cheerleader?
So, for example, if you give me an example of a negative I am statement, so what would that be?
Okay, I am lazy.
I am lazy, okay. Aren't you more than that? What are you that's not lazy?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Well, I'm sitting here with you doing this podcast, aren't I?
Yeah, okay, good. So you're actually working.
Yeah, actually am.
Yeah, so that's it. That's a very quick way to change the focus.
So just genuinely answering those questions, looking for a positive example.
Mm-hmm.
And this almost links back a little bit to our Raz episode, doesn't it, last week?
Yes.
Where, you have to set yourself up to look for the information you want. Of course, everybody's lazy sometimes. But that doesn't mean you are lazy. And I think that's important to find a difference. Just because you don't do as much as someone else, or you had a lie in today, or X or Y, that doesn't mean you are lazy.
No.
And it's this thing of beating ourselves up all the time. Well, look for the positive examples. Look for the times when you're not lazy. Look for the things when you are productive. Because there are examples there. They do exist.
Exactly. Because when we say limiting beliefs, we're stating it as if that's what we are all the time.
And we're very good at this, aren't we? We're brilliant at, if we're not phenomenally productive and happy and great and fantastic all the time, then that means we're never it. And it's getting out of this mindset, isn't it, of beating ourselves up in that. We're our own worst enemy.
So believing that we have to be perfect, and that, believing that in every single moment we have to do all these amazing things, and it's okay to have those moments of what we might call being lazy, because perhaps it's simply that we're just very good at relaxing.
Yeah. I mean, just to change route a little bit in a broader context, because we are our own worst enemies, and we do compare ourselves with other people, and you do have things like social media and society not really being useful for us in this context. How much can we blame, social media, businesses, companies? Because is it fair to say that it's in a lot of companies and businesses' interests for us to compare ourselves with other people, for us to want things that we don't necessarily need, for us to strive to perfection, because if we strive to perfection, there's this never-ending target that we can't reach that allows us to continue to be consumers. You know, I'm not trying to get too political here, but you know, it's in the interests of the system we live in, isn't it? Because if you're never beautiful enough, there's always something you can buy to make you more beautiful. Or as a man, you know, if you never have this status symbol to make you powerful and attractive to women or X or Y, then, you know, you're never going to get what you want, in inverted commas. You know, how much responsibility does society and businesses and governments and all these sorts of people have to take in a wider context?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point, because there is in marketing and with businesses and the commercial world, there is a lot of that going on, and in social media, especially in the fitness industry, and the beauty industry, there is a lot of that going on. However, in NLP and with clients, I encourage them a lot to really take on personal responsibility. I mean, we can blame all we want what's going on out there and blame companies and society and this and that and the other. However, it's up to us to filter what information we take in. So we can choose to follow those social media accounts or unfollow. We can choose to watch all those adverts on TV, or to pay attention to what all the companies are advertising, or those beauty magazines, or we can choose not to.
Yeah, it's our choice. We've still got a choice at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, in a practical sense, do you think that maybe it's worthwhile for people to question a little bit how often they use social media and maybe take a break from it and things like that? What are your thoughts on that?
Some people find it useful, yeah. I mean, I use social media for my business, so I'm using it regularly. However, I found it very useful to only follow the accounts and companies and people that I found positive and inspiring, and I unfollowed everything else.
Okay, so pick and choose a little bit more.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, okay, Emma. So, you know, what about you personally? You know, you can give me as much information as you want here. All right, I'm not going to push you too much. But how do you respond to your inner critic? You know, some examples of how you've dealt with it when it's come up to when it's, you know, been, you know, really prevalent in your mind.
Yeah. So there was one time that sticks out in my mind, where I had a holiday booked in Menorca. And it's a beautiful island, and I had a holiday book there, and I wanted to make a few changes to the booking. I had a friend coming from the UK, and I wanted to make sure that there were separate beds for both myself and her, and I was thinking, as I was sending the email, I was thinking, oh, it'll be really nice if I could have a terrace and a sea view as well. And I was thinking, oh, maybe I can add that in the email. And then straight away I noticed my inner critic saying, oh, you can't ask for all of that. You're just being greedy. And all these different thoughts and beliefs were coming up. And in that moment, I made a conscious choice that I could either listen to my inner critic and not send the email, or not send all of those requests and just think, oh, I'm just being greedy. I'm not going to bother. Or I'm going to do it anyway. So I did it anyway. I sent the email. And I asked for a terrace. I asked for sea view. I asked for everything that I thought would be nice for a holiday. And they replied and they said, oh, sorry, we can't do all of that, but thanks anyway. So I thought, okay, well, that's fine. I asked and I let it go. And when I arrived in Menorca, a funny thing happened is that the place, they actually double booked themselves. So when I arrived, they actually gave me a completely free upgrade to a 3-bedroom flat, terrace and sea view. And I didn't have to pay anything extra. So that was an example that was quite powerful for me, because in that moment, I realized I was kind of like, okay, yeah, it actually pays off to hear the inner critic and to continue regardless.
Yeah. I mean, just to maybe add to that, you know, like everybody, I think, I've had my own issues with my inner critic, and a good example I could probably give is I've been lucky enough to travel a fair bit and see some different places around the world, but there has been points in my life, especially when I was a bit younger, where I was in certain places and I'm sitting there and I'm completely not present in that place. I'm either thinking about something that already happened that made me feel bad, or thinking about the future because, I don't know, why can't I be in this situation all the time? Why haven't I created a life where I can travel more? Why I only got 1 week in this place? Or even being present, well, it would be better if I had a beautiful girl next to me here, or if I was with mates rather than on my own. And, you know, the issue I had before was I just thought, flipping heck, Tom, you're just a bit of a miserable git, really, aren't you, if you can't, like, enjoy it. And then I realised, no, this is your inner critic, and your inner critic is trying to, you know, keep you down and, you know, keep you fearful and keep those limiting beliefs with you that you've created over time. And, you know, for me, the thing that just clicked, well, it didn't click one day. It takes a lot of work. It takes many years. But one really important moment for me was, and we mentioned this before, was identifying it. You know, and as soon as I realized, no, Tom, you're not a miserable git. He is. You know, this isn't you. This isn't who you are. This isn't really who you are. And once I identified it, that, like, and we're going to say this every week about any sort of practical application we give, because it's all about awareness and self-awareness. That's always the biggest step, because if you're not aware of something, you can't do anything about it. Yeah. So as soon as I identified it, that was the key. That was the start. And then after I identified my inner critic, I mean, he's called Jeff, my inner critic. So
I love it.
Yeah, so I call him Jeff. So, and that was important to name him, because that means I've differentiated myself from him, which and psychologically that's a big thing, because all of a sudden it's not a different person anymore. You know, I'm talking to Jeff, it's not Tom. And that was the second really key, move I made. You know, so I've identified Jeff, I've differentiated him from myself, and I believe this, you know, this isn't just something to make me feel good or make me feel better about this situation. I know this isn't me. You know, this is something that's been socially constructed for my whole life. You know, so I know it's there, and that I'm at peace with that, which makes a big difference. So, all right,
yeah,
I've recognised Jeff. He's still there though. You know, so now what do I do? All right, well, for me it really helped being a bit compassionate. You know, understanding where he's from, why he's saying the things he's saying, why he's attacking me, because for X and Y reasons, certain things have happened in my life, and certain things have pushed me into those pushed him into those thought processes. You know, so it's being compassionate with yourself and not beating yourself up for what he's saying. So, you know, the next step is, all right, when he does say these things, how do I react? Well, it's, first thing, you don't act upon it, you know, so you don't just completely 100% immediately accept what your inner critic said, because you know it's not true, because it comes from a place of, you know, negativity or socially constructed, like, limiting beliefs and things like that. So you don't act upon it straight away. The second thing is, you don't have to believe it, because it's a half truth. It's something that's not your reality, again connected to your limiting beliefs. So
it's just the fearful part wanting to keep us within the comfort zone, and yeah, just recognizing that, learning from it, and understanding a little bit more about ourselves and our past, and choosing to really be present, because because when we're 100% present as well in the moments, we can't hear all of the limitations and negativity from the inner critic either, where we're really 100% present, enjoying the moment, being grateful for it.
Yeah, I mean, and this was something, so I wasn't quite there yet. I'm still not there. This is a lifelong process, right? But there was still something that wasn't quite working for me, because in my head I was rejecting Jeff completely. I was saying, you know, go away. You know, I thought the only solution here was when he doesn't exist anymore. And I realized, this isn't how it works either. You know, and this was really important for me as well. There's not a solution. The solution here isn't getting rid of your inner critic, in my opinion. I don't think you'll ever delete your inner critic. You're not going to wake up one day and they've just disappeared. I don't think that's going to happen.
As long as we're human with an ego, there will be the
and my
critic.
naive expectation initially was, well, I'm aware of him. I don't like him. I know it's not true. So why is he still here? Well, that was a mistake, you know. But okay, stay compassionate with yourself. Fair enough. If I can't reject him, he's not going to disappear. He's here. He's here for the long haul. What can I do? Well, what can you do? And this is where things like NLP and practical application of psychological theories or whatever are really useful, because you can manage it, you know. And even if it's something, and it sounds a bit stupid saying this, but techniques, for example, giving your inner critic appointments to see you, to speak to you. You know, it sounds crazy, but you know, no, now's not the time. You can come back and see me later. But all of a sudden, the control in that relationship's changed. You know, you decide when you converse with your inner critic, not the other way around. So, you know, even if you're in a moment and you're traveling and there's a beautiful sunset, but you're sad because you're on your own and, you know, there's not a partner or friends there, maybe before that would have ruined the moment. But now you say, okay, the inner critic, you can come back and talk to me later, but now I'm just going to be present and enjoy this sunset. And that's the difference. And it gets easier because the more you manage that situation, the more you gain control over that situation, the less they bother you. And eventually, you know, they're there in the background every so often, but they don't have that power they used to. They don't overwhelm you in the same way they used to. They can't affect you like they used to.
Yeah, and then you become so much more self-accepting of your whole self. The fears, the loving parts of yourself, everything. Because that's it. It's being really aware and noticing and having that conscious choice of, okay, am I going to listen to it and do what it says? Or am I going to choose to enjoy life regardless?
Yeah. All right. Well, I really love talking about the inner critic anyway, but it's been an absolute pleasure with you today. And I'm sure,
thank you.
I'm sure Jeff and everybody else's inner critics are going to be back in topic on another podcast anyway, aren't they?
It's a big topic, and it's something that, I'm sure we can touch upon again another time.
Brilliant. All right. This has been the Life Manual with me, Tom Payani, and Emma Bradford. It's been absolutely fantastic to have you here today.
Thank you.
You were listening to the Life Manual podcast with your hosts, Tom Payani and Emma Bradford. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share the link with your friends and family, helping us to spread these practical tools to more people in the world.